A shocking report reveals that 2 in 3 parents don't have first aid knowledge to help their child in an emergency. And we never know what could be around the corner for us or any of our families. To tell us more, I'm joined now by co-executive producer of Sudden Adult Death, My Sister's Silent Killer, Sam Richards, and also by Katie Frampton, Inherited Cardiac Conditions Nurse Specialist. Good afternoon.
Good
Hello,
afternoon.
Jason.
First of all, I mean, we're talking about this in particular because there's a new BBC Three documentary, and this is looking at the terrible situation that, Sam, led to you losing your son, Toby.
Yes, Jason, my eldest son, Toby, passed away suddenly and completely unexpectedly in the summer of 2019. And he was an incredibly fit and healthy young man who had, never had any illnesses, major illnesses. I always felt so blessed that my kids were so healthy. I mean, let alone he had never even fainted or passed out in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And when Tobe died, our family, we had never heard of SADS, didn't even know it existed. And suddenly we were kind of thrown into this whole world of testing and, what on earth killed Tobe. And we have a younger son and obviously terrified that, something like that could happen. And so we were, if lucky is the word, very fortunate that the borough that we lived in, Tobe's post-mortem and his heart went to this amazing woman who's in our film, Mary Shepherd, and Katie's fantastic team at St George's. We were fast-tracked into to have the tests that are very specific to these kind of sudden and unexpected deaths in young people. And my business is we make television programs, and we were so kind of horrified and just that we had never heard of this before Tobe died. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things that once you start, to talk about it, nearly every single person you come across says, "Oh, I knew someone." And so what we thought was we wanted to make a documentary about it so we could raise awareness, so that people could, understand a little bit better what it is. And so we pitched an idea to the BBC, and they were really receptive. And we've made this film with a lovely young director called Lindsay, and she worked with Patrick and an incredibly brave Patrick and his family and all the contributors as we followed them going through the process that me and my son have gone through, which is what on earth killed Patrick's sibling, and trying to find out. And that's our motivation for making the film, mm-hmm. so that people, knowledge is power, and, that there are 12, I now know that I didn't before, there are 12 young, unexpected deaths that could be linked to this a week in the UK. It's a vast number, and people don't even know about it.
Mm-hmm. And it is that unknown. As you say, people often say, "Oh, I know someone something happened to." It's happened to former colleagues at the radio station. Someone in their 20s passed away a number of years ago. And it is a shock to friends and family, and the lack of understanding makes that hurt even greater, for the fact that you don't know whether you could have done something, could you have found out, and that sort of doubt crosses your mind. And Katie, in what you see, obviously we've got potentially a cardiac incident which could cause this, with no obvious history.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult for the family, and we try as best as we can to support the family through this journey. As you say, lots of, particularly mums, feel a huge amount of guilt that they should have done something differently. Could they have prevented this? Largely the answer is no. They do just happen, and they are just such tragic events. And we just help families try and come to terms with what's happened and understand why it's happened, and to crucially protect other family members to ensure that this doesn't happen to any other members of the family.
Yeah, and in the documentary itself, ex-professional footballer Fabrice Muamba, he talks about his situation where he was effectively dead for nearly 20 minutes on a football pitch, being brought back round. For him, the worst happened in the right place at the right time. He had a team around him who could actually help. If you're at home, something like this happening potentially overnight, there's nothing the family might be able to do to assist.
Absolutely. And yes, as you say, Fabrice was very, very lucky. And unfortunately, about 90% of people who have a cardiac arrest outside of hospital don't survive. And so, that's why it's even more crucial that we raise awareness of this and put all our efforts into the research to prevent this from happening in the first place.
So what can families do? I mean, getting first aid trained is one thing, but you can't watch somebody the whole time, can you?
No, absolutely. And we would always say that, first aid training and to know how to do CPR is a fantastic skill that everybody should have. And having the defibrillators in the community is also very helpful. But ultimately, I think, people can donate to research, they can take part in research. And crucially, if something like this has happened in a family, then getting the family screened is vital.
Yeah, and we hear, I mean, particularly we're talking about Fabrice there. We often hear the story of being young footballers who might suffer a complication like this, a heart condition, and it's only because they are doing sport and being monitored that these things get picked up. Outside of somewhere where there's a professional organisation looking after you, you just wouldn't know.
Absolutely. Cardiac Risk in the Young do offer screenings for anybody aged 14 to 35 who would like to go for screening, which is fantastic, and a great charity that do that.
And Sam, obviously, thoughts remain with you and your family in your loss. But the work that you're doing through this documentary as well, and telling Patrick's story on the loss of his sister, it is about awareness. It is about getting out there and being part of the BBC Three output, which is specifically aimed at younger people. It's getting that message to get yourself checked. We've already heard you say you can be screened. It is well worth doing a simple check for a condition that you may, before now, as with your family, just had no idea was happening to people.
Well, that's absolutely right. And, BBC Three, we pitch it to BBC Three because it is that kind of 16 to 34-year-old demographic. And I think that, for us, if we had been aware of this before, and I think Katie would say, screening is not a silver bullet. It's not going to pick up everything. But Tobe was, exercising very, very hard because he was training to do the Marines commando training. And if we had known about this, I probably would have said, Tobe, let's have an ECG, knowing now that may not have picked it up, but at least there's a better chance because they pick up some. And I just feel like that plays back into what Katie was saying. I think when you have children and as a mother, your default is guilt. I spend so much time, as I know other mothers and parents do, thinking, why didn't I get him checked? Why didn't I do this? What would have happened if I'd been there? All this kind of stuff goes over and over in your mind. And it doesn't matter how many times you kind of, rationalize it. And thank goodness for Katie and her team, because they are brilliant at explaining these things. And as you just heard with Fabrice, he had everybody there that could, thank goodness, do that for him. And I do know rationally that even if I had been there when Tobe died, if I was in the next room, I wouldn't have been able to have saved him. But what I would have been able to do, had I known about this condition, is I would have been able to kind of take him down to a friend of mine who runs a heart screening place and say, Toad's, doing all this training, can we give him an ECG? And I think that's the thing. We know that people are tested a lot in kind of elite sports and other things. And I think that if, you're playing Saturday morning football or you're in the rowing club or what have you, if people watch this documentary, they might think, well, let's do some fundraising or let's, get some screening. Again, I know it's not perfect, but even if it can catch some of them, that's a really, really good thing, and so it just feels so important that people have an awareness of this. And also, you know, when we were lucky with the coroner, that we had just the most brilliant joined up experience with the coroner and our subsequent referral to St. George's. It's not like that nationwide. You know, Mary Shepherd in the film, in her research, they need more hearts. They need more, you know, they need to build up the gene banks so they can look at these arrhythmias and look at, you know, to gain more knowledge. And so we and to be able to better manage them. You know, when I hear and I have in the last year or so, a young person's death certificate says natural causes. There's nothing natural about a perfectly healthy young person dropping dead, you know, with no warning unexpectedly. You know, my son was passionate about motorbikes and drove a motorbike. You know, I thank God that he was at home, Jason. If Tobe had been driving his motorbike, God only knows what could have happened to other people, but our family narrative would have been completely different. It would have been, oh, Tobe, you know, he's on his motorbike, he's young, he shouldn't have been. And so every time you hear someone falls off a building from a scaffolding or is in the bottom of a swimming pool, every time now I think, could that be, you know, it's not just drowning because they weren't a strong swimmer. And this is the thing. I am of the belief, the more we've worked on this film and you know, being tested with Katie and her colleagues, that this is much, much, much more prevalent than we all know. I mean, in our family's case, we had never even heard of it.
Yeah, and a small cost to look at testing, greater understanding through the research that's been done here is going to help, and we hopefully can have the opportunity to avoid a loss of life, which is unnecessary potentially in this day and age, where treatments may be available if only we can find a condition which unfortunately isn't visible until the last moment.
That's right. Absolutely. I just wanted to say, obviously, you know, Patrick Mead and his family have been so incredibly brave, you know, allowing us to kind of follow them through this terrible, terrible time to try and better understand what happened to his sister Lauren. And it's an amazing thing that they've done. And I really hope that, you know, young people, parents, as many people as possible can watch it.
Well, available via iPlayer, Sudden Adult Death, My Sister's Silent Killer. You can find that documentary there. Understand, share, talk about, and although it's a difficult subject, it is certainly well worth approaching, so you can have that conversation. And there is testing that can be done, so you can find out more there. So check out that documentary on iPlayer. Katie, where can we go for more information about the screening for 14-year-old upwards?
So we'll share the Cardiac Risk in the Young website, where the details of screening for them will be available.
Okay, so cardiac arrest in the young is what we're looking for if you wish to Google that, as I say. But do get to iPlayer, check out the BBC Three feed for Sudden Adult Death, My Sister's Silent Killer. Sam Richards, co-executive producer of the programme and documentary, and Katie Frampton, inherited cardiac conditions nurse specialist. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Thank
Jason.
you so much, Jason.